Thanks for that, Polly. Well, keeping me company tonight until 7. My panel, we've got Pamana Assad, who's a Labour councillor, Michael Heaver, who's the former Brexit Party MEP, and Ashley Frawley, who's a sociologist at Swansea University. And also, you know the drill on Dewbs and Co by now. It's not just about us and our thoughts, it's about you at home as well and yours. What do you think to all the goings on today? Let's face it, there is a lot going on. You can get in touch with me on email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GB News. I must also remind you as well, if you haven't already, get yourself over to our YouTube page, hit subscribe. You can watch us live. What a treat for you. Or if you miss us, you can watch us back or just pick your best bits from the channel. I don't know why I said best bits from the channel, because obviously what I mean is Dewbs and Co. That is, of course, your best bit. Well, there you go. If you've not done that, YouTube, hit subscribe. We'll see you there. Now, let's get on to some of the goings on today. The top story, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, has vowed to fight to the end as he's appealed for more help from the UK in a historic address to the House of Commons. He's called on the UK to increase the sanctions to Russia, to recognise them as a terrorist state and to help protect Ukrainian skies. Zelensky said the Ukrainian people have not slept since Russia invaded their country 13 days ago. He also described it as a war we did not start. But he said his country will continue to fight, whatever the costs, and added that they will not give up and they will.
And I'm very grateful to you, Boris. Please increase the pressure of sanctions against this country, and please recognize this country as a terrorist state. And please make sure that our Ukrainian skies are safe. Please make sure that you do what needs to be done and what is stipulated by the greatness of your country. Best of all to Ukraine and to the United Kingdom.
Promising more weapons to Ukraine, the banning of importing Russian oil, and increasing sanctions on Russia and Russian individuals. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, joins me now. I have to say, Darren, I keep repeating, and it's been said a lot and will be said a lot, that really was a historic moment in the House of Commons today, wasn't it? Zelensky videoing in to that House.
Yeah, indeed. It's the first time the foreign leader has ever addressed the House of Commons, a chamber that we all know, frankly, has been around for a very, very long time. Standing ovation both before and after that speech. And President Zelensky channeled in many ways both Shakespeare and Churchill in that speech, insisting when he was asked that question about whether Ukraine would be or not to be, he concluded by saying that Ukraine would be, that it would overcome this Russian invasion and continue to survive as a nation state. And also, in channeling Churchill, he insisted Ukraine will fight to the end. He said that they would fight them to the end in the sea, in the air. We will continue fighting on our land, whatever the cost. We will fight them in the forests, in the fields, on the shores, in the streets. So quite a powerful speech by President Zelensky. He was very thankful of the UK and also, it must be said, of the Prime Minister Boris Johnson as well, not least of all on the issue of sanctions, but also on the military equipment that the UK has supplied to Ukraine over the last couple of months. But clearly he also thinks that doesn't go far enough. He wants to see further sanctions on Russia, and also he wants to see a no-fly zone over Ukraine. Now, on both of those issues, there is a slight division. On sanctions, we know that the UK today announced that they are going to go further, essentially phasing out the use of Russian oil by the end of this year. Not gas, but oil, in line with the United States. And that is a significant move because, of course, Russia does heavily rely on revenues from oil. So on sanctions, there is a sense that the West is going even further, even if it means hitting you and I and everyone else in this country in the pocket, frankly, because it will lead to higher energy prices at a time in which they're already essentially at record highs. In terms of the no-fly zone, though, there doesn't seem to be any movement on this in terms of NATO imposing a no-fly zone. It would mean getting involved in direct action with Russia, something the West does not want to do, Michelle, though there are suggestions only suggestions at this stage that Poland could supply some of its jets to the Ukrainians to get them back into the air. That is possibly going to happen, but it is frankly up to the Polish to decide what to do. And finally tonight, and some news that's come in from Russia, because there's been pressure on companies essentially to self-sanction themselves, if you like. You were talking about this last night. McDonald's has announced in the last couple of minutes that it is going to temporarily close all of its 850 outlets in Russia, given that invasion and given the public mood, it must be said, elsewhere in the world.
Yeah, and Darren, finally, what's your sentiment on this, the calls for Russia to be recognised as a terrorist state we just heard there?
Well, I mean, you know, as always with these things, you can use these words, and we've heard President Putin be called a war criminal, haven't we, in the last couple of weeks. Many feel that war crimes have been committed. At the end of the day, frankly, there will be potentially retribution after this. We know that people might want to take Russia and certain individuals to The Hague, to the International Court of Justice. But branding Russia a terrorist state, branding Vladimir Putin a war criminal, while it is affecting the propaganda campaign to a large degree, it doesn't practically make any difference. I mean, the West has already imposed quite stringent sanctions. There may well be more to follow. That doesn't really matter how you brand particular people or states. It's more the actions that are being carried out inside Ukraine. And the fear is that, of course, you end up in this kind of really difficult cycle where you impose more sanctions because Russia ups the ante, but they up the ante in reaction to those sanctions, which then causes the West to go even further, and you just get involved in this kind of endless cycle. But the fear is that, as difficult as this now is for Russia in terms of its economic sanctions, but also what's happening on the ground, that they aren't making as much progress, it seems, as they would have hoped, that they will resort to more dreadful means to get their way. And that, frankly, and very tragically, and we see these images, sadly means the deaths of more innocent Ukrainians, many of whom are frankly trying to flee from the cities that the Russians are shelling.
Darren McCaffrey, our political editor there, thanks for your insight. Michael, I'll come to you first. An awful situation, of course. That is a very historic situation, as we've just been hearing. And Zelensky, whilst he didn't, he's quite a very clever communicator, very careful communicator, very engaging communicator. He stopped short of basically coming out and saying, please enforce a no-fly zone, but he pretty much suggested that, asking us to protect the skies and do what we can do. Should there be a no-fly zone over Ukraine?
No, I think Boris Johnson's got this spot on at the moment. I think a no-fly zone basically leads to a nuclear World War III. I think Zelensky, I mean, what a leader he has proven to be, truly inspirational. I think we in the UK can be very proud in the leading role that we've taken after Putin's invasion of Ukraine. I mean, if you look today at the news, the UK and US to ban Russian oil imports, I think it's a wake-up call for the West more generally. When you look at, for instance, Germany, and now they're actually ruling out the banning of imports from Russia. They've allowed themselves, Angela Merkel disgracefully has allowed Germany to get into a position where it's so weak, it's now overly dependent on Russia. And I think in terms of energy, in terms of these sanctions, you've seen the UK and the US today leading the world globally, and that is the right thing to do. Yeah, and I, of course, Sinta, many of us will remember certain Donald Trump flagging concerns about Germany and Russian oil and gas. Pimana, your thoughts on what you've seen today?
So I think that it's really, really, I mean, it gives me goosebumps listening to President Zelensky, because I wish that the same sort of solidarity and support had been shown to Afghanistan. And to me, this proves that, you know, proxy wars are okay, but direct wars not so much. And one of the things that really, really sticks out to me is that this consistent ask for a no-fly zone by President Zelensky, and it's being continuously rejected by NATO because of this idea that we might be engaging in a confrontational war with Russia if that is implemented. I don't know if that is true, actually. If we do implement a no-fly zone, you know, there are legal questions on whether we can or can't do that. But if Ukraine enters the European Union, then we need to seriously consider that as an option, because at the end of the day, the Ukrainian president knows what he needs to defend his country. And the comments from the NATO Secretary General make me think that NATO's okay with allowing Russia to maybe take Ukraine and then just hold them off at that border there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to be clear as well that Putin actually made, a statement or a position himself clear where he said that if anyone kind of does this no-fly zone, because let's be clear about what a no-fly zone is, it sounds like a sensible thing. I mean, of course, if someone's bombarding you from above, you would want those skies to be clear. Yeah. So I absolutely understand where the sentiment, the request is coming from, and I share his concern. However, it's not a small matter. Putin's already said if anyone gets involved, he will see those people on a no-fly zone as essentially being involved in this conflict militarily. It's not just a case of keeping the skies clear. To do that, you're going to have to potentially be shooting down Russian aircraft. I want your thoughts on that. Do you think that is something that we ought to be doing as NATO members, shooting down potentially Russian aircraft in the skies over Ukraine? Ashley?
Well, I'm not sure that it's actually even tactically a very good idea, because most of the Russian actions are ground-based at the moment anyway. And it is an escalation. I mean, I think obviously there is a rationale for doing it. There's a certain desperation, but it would represent an escalation. I think the real issue is that NATO seemed to have intimated very early on that they would offer a lot more support to Ukraine than they were ultimately willing to give. And so you can see this desperation in Zelensky's voice and in that speech of why would you lead us into this, or why would you not lead us into this, but why would you kind of give us a sense that we would be protected when at the end of the day we're not. But this action that's being asked for won't actually do anything, I don't think, and I think it would be an unwarranted escalation. The other thing that concerned me a little bit about that speech is that there's a lot of World War II imagery, a lot of kind of allusion to this idea that Russia is a kind of it's like fighting the fascists, and that is really, really effective, but this is not that conflict. And I think what we can wind up doing is basically, what would a no-fly zone do? It would satisfy people who are saying, we have to do something, so let's shoot ourselves in the foot, basically, just for the sake of doing something. So you risk basically turning this into a war of virtues, doing things that are tactically poor for reasons that don't actually match reality. This is not World War II. There may not be a danger of appeasement. We don't necessarily need to escalate this conflict. There aren't any really good ways out, but I don't think the best way is to make things worse.
Yeah, and I think it's worth pointing out as well that today there's been an open letter written by 27, what some are calling foreign policy heavyweights, calling for a limited no-fly zone. They're calling on the Biden administration, together with the NATO allies, to impose what they call a limited no-fly zone over Ukraine, starting with the protection over the humanitarian corridors. They say, as part of this letter, that this is not in search of confrontation with Russia, but to avert and deter Russian bombardment. I've got to say, it might not be searching confrontation, but I certainly worry that confrontation will find you if indeed that is what you do. And speaking of refugees, let's cut over to our reporter Bradley Harris, who is on the border with Ukraine and Poland as we speak. Bradley, good evening to you.
Yeah, good evening. I'm actually just over an hour away from the border. I have been right up to the border, actually, to see the scenes there in the past couple of days. It's interesting, when you're watching what's going on between Russia and Ukraine on the TV at home in Britain, and you see the refugees fleeing their country, you get a reminder of the impact that the war is having. But here in Poland, over the last 24 hours or so, not just at the border, but wherever you go in this country, even here at the train stations, you get constantly reminded of the impact that this war is having on Ukrainians. We're going to come inside one of the train stations here in Rzeszów in Poland. I want to just come this way and actually show you what is being set up here in a train station. We're going to just come around the corner. This is water, this is juice, this is food, snacks, items that are available to Ukrainians who are coming into this train station. As soon as they arrive, bags of sandwiches. Some of these people may not have eaten or drank anything for up to 20 hours or so. They've been in cars for long amounts of time, and this is a train station over an hour away from one of the main border crossings. One of the main reasons for that, of course, is because when they get through the border, they've got to find somewhere else to sleep. They've got to find somewhere to have food, to drink, and there becomes a bottleneck at the border. So the next stage is to try and disperse Ukrainians, find other areas where there's availability of beds and so on. And here in Poland, not just the food or the drinks that are free, it's actually trains as well. This is one of the platforms. One has just set off now, actually, that train there, and that is free of charge. They're not charging Ukrainians a ticket. You've got to show a Ukrainian passport in order to have that service for free. And I just want to bring your attention this way, because over here, this is a waiting area where many Ukrainians have been sitting, waiting to find out where their destination is going to lead them to next, what their future might hold. And this map next to the ticket booth shows where we are now in Rzeszów. And this, again, many people are waiting here because inevitably in the next 24 to 48 hours they're going to be looking towards these destinations here to see if there's availability again of beds, of food, places where people can stay, because there isn't anything here for a lot of Ukrainians at the moment. So they're going further out into Poland to see what might be available if people can take them in. So this is the situation here. Still many refugees from Ukraine waiting to find out what their future might hold.
Frawley Harris, thank you very much. Rana Masad, I'll open this up to you. I mean, your family have actually been in a not too dissimilar situation. You fled Afghanistan, didn't you? I mean, watching that, it's given me goosebumps because, you know, I simply cannot imagine the fear, the disorientation, the confusion, the desperation that those people must be feeling right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's very triggering watching that, because I was evacuated from Afghanistan last summer when the Taliban took over. I was visiting my family members, and so watching those scenes really makes me think of what happened to Afghans last summer. And I think that's why I'm so, you know, on the side of the Ukrainians at this moment, that we need to actually do something that will help them, because it's not okay for people to be fleeing their homes like that. It's not okay for children to be, their entire lives are erupted, you know. They're going to a different country with different culture, different language. Everything that they've built over the last how many years that they've been living in Ukraine is completely shattered and gone and finished.
So what should we do?
I think that we, you know, Priti Patel announced that there is a community support scheme open to individuals of Ukrainian origin, nationality, that can come over to the UK, and it has no numerical limit, open to anybody who wants to come or has a family member. The issue is visas, the fact that Ukrainians are having to apply for visas to come here. You know, local councils like mine, where I am a councillor, want to do our bit in supporting Ukrainian refugees, but we need the government to also give us funding in order to do that. The only concern I have is that we're already dealing with Afghan refugees who are already in holding hotels here across London as well as across the UK. They still haven't found permanent places to live, and they haven't been integrated. And so another influx of refugees into the UK is going to put a lot of pressure on local councils and local services.
Yeah, hugely. Ashley Frawley.
I think that's absolutely right. There have been lots of organizations that have done really good work for a long time that not a lot of people knew very much about, that integrating people into communities is a really important part of managing a refugee situation. And there's the will there. There's definitely the will within the UK population, but the government appears to be dragging its feet. I think, however, that just kind of going back to the point about what do we do, I think right now there's a danger that we're being begged to act, at least in terms of the conflict. Obviously, the refugee situation, we have to do something about people. We actually do have to act because people need to eat and sleep somewhere. But when it comes to the conflict situation, we're kind of being begged to act without thinking. And what worries me is this whole conflict is being transformed into a war between good and evil. You see this kind of weird deification of Zelensky. There's like memes going around about how sexy he is and this sort of thing, and turning him into this hero. He's absolutely demonstrated a lot of heroism, but kind of turning it into this hero this on one side and this madman on the other blinds us to some of the deeper roots of this conflict that we really need to think about if we're going to get out of it and avoid similar situations in the future. What you mentioned before was one example of that around energy. So there's been competition between the US and Russia for access to the European energy market. No one's really talked about that. That's just one part of this. So obviously there's much more going on, but we're being asked and begged not to think more deeply. Act now, and the consequences are dire.
Yeah, and I do, Michael, in fact, you tell me what you think.
No, I just wanted to quickly say, I mean, I think it's massively unfair that it seems these people who we should be helping, it looks like a lot of them are women and children leaving a conflict zone. And of course we need to help them, but what a contrast, the fact they're having to jump through these hoops to those we've seen come across the channel. 90% we know now from Home Office figures are men, paying gangsters to come across illegally on small boats. And we now know the cost of that on a daily basis is around £3.5 million on hotels. It's pretty sad to me that that amount of money is going towards helping people who've come to this country illegally, as I said, 90% men, instead of being able to help these people.
Well, like mix of views here. I want to hear your views. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. You can tweet me at Michelle Dewbs or at GB News. We speak a lot about the refugee situation and also where we would put all of these people. And I have to say, many of them perhaps would just want to be here temporarily until it is safe to go back to their own home, I suspect. Speaking of homes, would you open your home and give refuge to a Ukrainian family? I think there's a poll running on GB News Twitter right now. You can get involved there. So far, 40% of you almost are saying yes, you would open your home to Ukrainian refugees. 60% are saying no. I'm fascinated by that because if I had space and the ability, I absolutely would give refuge to I mean, you see those children, don't you? And it pulls at your heartstrings. Very briefly, Pamana, because I need to go to a break.
I think it's really, really important that no, because, you know, integration and support of refugees, taking them into your home is a noble thing to do, but then actually supporting them to get permanent, you know, status and living here is a whole different ballgame.
But I'd be interested. I'd be interested in how many of these Ukrainian refugees actually want permanent residency and to stay here. Because I would suspect
any refugee from wherever they are in the world does not want to permanently stay somewhere else. I know my family did not think that they were going to permanently live in a different country. They thought that the war would end and then they would return. But it never happened.
And that, to me, is a key point between a genuine refugee and an economic migrant, if you ask me. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about the NHS, Sajid Javid's plans to modernise and reform the NHS. Will it work? Will it make a difference? Your thoughts and more coming up.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
Make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
That you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Just a brief reminder as to who my panel are tonight. We've got Pamana Assad, who's a Labour councillor, Michael Heaver, former Brexit Party MEP, and Ashley Frawley, who's a sociologist at Swansea University. Lots and lots of response and reaction from you guys, the viewers, to those last couple of comments. In particular, lots of thoughts around no-fly zones, whether or not they are a good idea in this situation or not. Stuart says, I have total respect for this man, obviously meaning Zelensky. We need to take on the Russians. And if that means war, then so be it. Because, he says, we will have to at some stage in the near future, unless change comes from within Russia itself. Interesting. What do you think? Lots of people saying, Michael says, Michelle, madness when it comes to no-fly zones. We must not get involved. If we do, we're going to have World War III. Carol says, under no circumstances should we be doing this, the no-fly zone. We would put the whole world in danger. She says, as sympathetic as she is to Ukraine, that would be too big a price to pay. And NATO needs to protect its own too, she says. Lots of responses as well. On the refugee situation there, Pentoria says, yes, we would absolutely open our home to a refugee family, but we're not sure how it all works or how to do it. Marco would say, I welcome any genuine help for those people to come into the country, but he wouldn't have strangers in his own home. Would you? I'm interested by that. I think I probably would, you know. I do. I look at some of these mums and their babies and I don't know how it does. It affects me, and I think I would help them if I could. Would you? gbviews@gbnews.uk. But for now, let's just talk about a different topic, shall we? The NHS in particular is what I want to focus on right now, because new reforms aiming to introduce more modern, improved and personalised patient care through the NHS have been set out. The Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, announced how the plans will basically give greater control and choice to patients over their care. This was in a speech at the Royal College of Physicians. Let's have a listen.
We're putting prevention at the heart of the NHS app, making it the front door for preventative tools and services like a new digital health check. And we're going to go further and develop apps and websites that give people direct access to diagnostics and therapies.
Choice if waiting times are long. I mean, I love the use of the word if. I think we mean definitely there. Expansion of personalised care and health budgets, and increased use of the NHS app. Well, as I've just alluded to, the NHS waiting list stands at almost 6 million people. I have to say, I have, unfortunately, a bit too much reason to use the NHS at the moment, and my experience has been appalling. And I do not aim that criticism directly at the frontline doctors, nurses, etc. I just aim it at the way things are currently organised at the moment. And Ashley, I've got to say, to me, there seems to be no real recognition of the mess that the NHS is in. For example, we have to deal with something at the moment that has a protocol of a 48-hour response. That does not get delivered at all, ever. It's laughable, the thought of it. It's acknowledged it's not delivered. When you then try and get a different resolution and response, what you get pushed back is that's not the protocol. So you have the problem, and you still have the old traditional protocols in place that don't allow people to kind of get around obstacles in their way. So whilst I am interested in Sajid Javid's reforms, I kind of glaze over a little bit with my eyes, because I just think, I'm not sure that you really, truly appreciate just how bad it is at the moment. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the cure is a double dose of the disease, basically. I mean, you can't try to solve these problems by creating markets where none exist. The NHS is in need of reform, but that attention needs to go to the enormous, bloated kind of bureaucracy, the bloated managerial class that exists within the NHS. All of these, there are so many junk jobs that people do, just gathering so much information and data for surveillance, for prevention and so on, for all of these tools of population surveillance that don't actually work. And that was what Javed was talking about when he's saying, oh, we're going to expand these, we're going to focus more on prevention. I think the NHS needs to focus on being able to treat people when they are sick. I think there's far too much attention to the management of everyday life, the management of the machinery and the bureaucracy, and we need to focus on actually being able to have enough doctors and nurses to actually treat people. That should be the number one thing. For years, there's been this emphasis on prevention and increased focus on everyday life. And it hasn't actually worked. It hasn't actually taken any of the pressure off the NHS. In fact, it's created new problems, like the ranks of the worried well. When you tell people, oh, be aware of all these issues, check your moles and so on, well, that creates increased pressure on the NHS because the emphasis on prevention just creates people who are constantly monitoring themselves and so on. We need to focus more on, instead of thinking about the body as a temple that everyone needs to be constantly kind of praying at, and think about it as a vehicle that gets us from A to B, and you fix it when it breaks down.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but I've got very clear visions in my head of people that absolutely do not treat their body as a temple, Michael, that treat it more as like a 24/7 rave and shove all kinds of stuff into it and then expect the NHS and the taxpayers to pick up the pieces when it goes wrong. Your thoughts?
I mean, it is one of the things that people are talking about now in terms of the obesity crisis in this country, the massive strain that is putting on the NHS. I'm actually a little disappointed that after COVID, which we know if you're overweight, had an increased risk for that reason, that we've not seen a big government campaign to actually encourage people, particularly younger people, to get out there, go to the gym and eat healthily as much as possible. I mean, I certainly don't envy the job that Sajid Javid has got. It's a legacy of lockdown. We have these huge backlogs. A&E waiting times were getting pretty bad anyway before lockdown. Obviously, that has exacerbated everything. But it talks of apps and things like that. I mean, I think what most people want is to be able to see a health professional face-to-face and have that face-to-face contact to help diagnose things early. And I'll just throw this in as well, Michelle, something, and it relates to housing, which we touched on earlier as well. The fact is, we have a surging population. We recently saw a few years ago the highest annual population growth in this country for 70 years, over 500,000 a single year, most of that due to mass migration. The fact is, when you talk about how many doctors and nurses we need, of course, if you continue with mass migration and a population surge, you'll need to continually expand. The NHS, due to that increased demand, is only going to grow greater.
Amana?
So I fundamentally disagree with what has just been said in terms of mass migration. I don't think that is the thing that is putting pressure on the NHS. I think that people are living longer, and therefore we have an elderly population, and therefore they are required more health checks and more care. But I have questions on these changes that Sajid Javid wants to implement. I mean, he's saying that people who have been on the waiting list for 18 months or more will be offered an alternative healthcare option. And so my question is, what does that exactly mean? To me, this seems like a conservative agenda of privatising the NHS in a more formal way. And the reason why I say this is because are people going to be offered an option to pay for healthcare from private companies and contractors? That's the fundamental question I have. I think that healthcare should be free at point of use. But I think that the NHS does need reform. But I think that it needs reform in the sense of listening to the doctors and nurses on the front lines who are treating patients. They know what they need in order to get through serving and making sure people live and are healthy. Unfortunately, I agree with what Ashley said in terms of managerial, business, bureaucracy, weighing down the NHS and not really looking at patient care. On the NHS app, I think that the real question for me is, with an elderly population, will people be able to even use that app to get the preventative tools that Sajid Javid is talking about?
Michael, I think I can hear an intake of breath
I just don't
in my left ear.
I don't like this whole idea of society as we become sort of a nation and a world that's just continually staring at devices all the time and everything becomes computerised. And I'm not anti-technology at all, far from it. But when it comes to health, I really do think being face-to-face and having a face-to-face diagnosis can never be replaced by video chats or anything else. And as you mentioned, particularly when it comes to elderly people, they want to have that face-to-face contact, and that really needs to be a top priority.
Yeah, and I also, this whole kind of thing that you just mentioned as well there, Pamana, where you say it's free at the point of use, that kind of makes me bristle a little bit, because the NHS is not free. I get the sentence and I get the sentiment around it, but it's not free. It's funded largely by national insurance, and actually we'll all be aware by now that there is currently, anyway, I mean, God only knows what's going to happen, but there's currently a planned increase in national insurance. So I just kind of wonder, when we say about private, by the way, just about these reforms, I think the plan from Sajid is that if people can choose basically where they get their care from, so if there's too long a waiting list here, for example, you might be able to pick and choose and go over there or go private, which the NHS would perhaps pick the bill up. But if you do have to go private, so if you have to have private health insurance, shouldn't you get a discount on your national insurance? I think you should.
I don't know. That's probably a question for Sajid Javid, but
it's a question from our viewers, Dewbs and Co viewers. We'll fix it. We don't need Sajid Javid. We'll sort it all out amongst us. Do you reckon if you pay for private health insurance, do you think you should still have to pay as much national insurance contributions? I say no. What do you say? But carry on.
Just on the point about education, I think this is really, really key in terms of educating the population about exactly what it costs. I know because 3 of my siblings are all healthcare professionals. One of them is a doctor, 2 of them are pharmacists. And they are doing their bit by educating patients, by saying, this is costing the NHS this amount of money, and we're subsidising this. So please don't waste the NHS's money. And I think that is really key for people to understand.
Indeed. And do you know what else I'd do? I mean, who needs Sajid Javid when you've got Dewbs and Co? I would take a debit card from people. So when you book an appointment, when you register with NHS, I'd take a debit card. And if you don't turn up for your appointment, I'd debit you some money. That's what I would do. Because how many nurse shows do you have? All these appointments that Michael's saying you want you to get in face to face. Well, that's all well and good if people turn up. But all too often, I suspect that they don't. I would debit their card. I'd take some money off them. That would help with the shortfall of funding, wouldn't it? Or do you just think I'm crackers? Tell me what you think. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about bullying. John Berker has today been suspended by Labour, banned from Parliament and called a serial bully. What do you make to this? Overreaction? Or quite right? I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Just a reminder as to who my panel is tonight. We've got Pimana Assad, who's the Labour councillor, Michael Heaver, who's the former Brexit Party MEP, and Ashley Frawley, who's a sociologist at Swansea University. My panel have just been having a conversation, continuing the conversation about the NHS in the break. They were talking about who perhaps could weightlift who. I won't tell you who was suggesting what. I'll leave you to guess. Who on earth do you think could weightlift who on this panel? It won't be who you think, I can tell you. Lots of responses, by the way, still coming in about the Ukrainian situation. Of course, lots and lots of you getting in touch. There seems to be a slight divide here about whether or not there should be, for example, the no-fly zone. Vincent says, and I think you sum it up quite well, Vincent. You say, when thinking with the heart, I doubt that there is anyone who wouldn't like to send troops or planes to help into Ukraine, but when voting with your head, you have to say it would be an act of madness on the part of UK and NATO to do it, even if it was as little, he says, as just a 5% chance of it leading to a full-on war with Vincent. A war with Vincent. Your Vincent, what you meant, Vincent, was a war with Russia. I got what you meant. But yeah, I think you sum it up quite well there, Vincent. The heart says one thing, doesn't it? And the head says another, but do keep your thoughts coming in. Moving on, the former House of Commons Speaker, John Berker, the man who was charged with regulating politicians' behaviour, of course, has been suspended from Labour and banned for life from the House of Commons by the independent expert panel after an investigation following accusations of bullying. Following that investigation, he was called, I quote, a serial liar and a bully by the panel and displayed undermining and threatening behaviour towards staff, including abuse and displays of anger. Mr Berker was Speaker of the House of Commons from 2009 to 2019 and presided over what some might say was a turbulent period during which the House of Commons debated the UK's exit from the EU. Mr Berker, I have to say, has responded with a strongly worded statement calling the report a travesty of justice rooted in prejudice, spite and hearsay. What do you think to this? Should bullying basically come with what might be a lifetime ban? Pimana Assad, you are indeed a Labour councillor, so I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts?
So I have worked in Parliament, and I think the one thing that I have learnt from my time working in Parliament and with MPs is that bullying and harassment cases are widespread across different parties. And one of the things that's very, very clear is that the internal HR process in Parliament is not fit for purpose and doesn't work to protect staffers. And what it needs is an external, independent process that actually supports staffers with the claims that they bring against members of Parliament. And I think this claim here literally shows us that the internal processes haven't worked, where people have come forward with these allegations and they haven't been investigated properly.
What is it? I mean, you're saying to me that you think that this bullying, etc., is rife. I mean, I'm paraphrasing what you say there. Why? Do you think this power goes to their head? Do you think people actually think that they're more important than they actually are? What do you think it is?
Yeah, I do think that. I think that when people get elected to the House of Commons, it should be a privilege. They should understand that they've been put there by the people's vote, right? But I think that this really shows people's true character, and power does get to some people's heads and they don't know how to act right.
Michael?
Well, I think John Berco's behaviour generally as Speaker was a complete disgrace. Of course, he was hailed as a hero by hardline Remainers, wasn't he? And I really do think he diminished the role of Speaker. Thankfully now, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, I think, is actually bringing some prestige back to that role. One thing I would note, though, was a report at the Telegraph at the weekend that potentially John Berker could be Labour's London mayoral candidate going forward. And I'm not sure I see that happening anymore. But the fact that that was even suggested, I think, was pretty insane.
Ashley, what do you think to this whole reason? I'll make it less about Berker and talk about generally. I mean, Pimana's saying there that bullying, etc., is pretty much rife. I do think it's people that just get a little bit ahead of themselves. They think there's something that they're actually not.
Well, I think bullying is rife because we've expanded what it means to bully. So this word has moved from the playground to the adult world, which is the first step. And then after that, it's expanded from kind of all sorts of behaviors all the way down to passive aggressiveness. So what we define as bullying has become very, very expansive. I don't think people's behavior has actually gotten much worse. Now, far be it from me to defend Berker. As a Brexiteer, I'm not going to, one to defend Remainers. But I think this behavior is a reason not to hire someone, but it's not a reason to launch costly inquiries. People are jerks. That's what happens. They shouldn't be jerks in the workplace, but it's not. We've turned this into kind of a social justice issue about abuse and so on, when it's an interpersonal issue about behavior. And we're increasingly doing that. We're turning these interpersonal issues into public issues, into social issues. And I think and then we get this sense, oh, people are becoming so bad now. No, we're just becoming more blasé about what we label bad behavior, although this person's behavior was particularly nasty. I don't deny that.
Pamana, are you just becoming a little bit weak, shall we say, seeing things as bullying that perhaps might not have been?
I don't think so. I think these people are elected to the House of Commons. They are public figures, and therefore they should be held accountable for their behaviour. And so I don't think that this idea of this being turned into from an interpersonal issue to a public issue. I think it is a public issue because they are elected representatives, and they should be upholding the best standards and the best behaviour that we want from our elected representatives. I think that bullying and harassment in the workplace should be taken seriously because it does impact people's mental health and people's life, and it has had detrimental effects on people where they've had to leave their jobs and therefore give up their livelihoods.
Yeah, I think you hit on something quite interesting there. I do personally think that too many elected officials actually think they're celebrities, and they're not celebrities. They go on these daft reality shows, some of them as well. Blows my brain. They're public servants, or at least they should be, and they should be quite easily to boot out. But unfortunately, in various situations, we do have situations where someone, quite frankly, would vote a tin of baked beans in if it had the right rosette. And I think sometimes that goes to the head of the MP because they think that you're voting in that individual when often they are not. Anyway,
I could just say we're just a stone. I agree with you, but what I'm saying is that that's a reason to vote someone out. That's a reason not to hire someone. We're like a stone's throw away from criminalizing interpersonal behaviors, and that's the problem. This is the kernel of that issue.
So you think that kind of behavior is okay normally?
No. Look, saying that it shouldn't be a matter of a public inquiry is not saying that it's a good behavior. I agree with you that people should uphold those values, but when they do not, it's not a matter to spend a ton of public funds having this big inquiry. It's a reason to boot someone out. It's a reason to not hire someone. It's a reason not to vote for someone.
The reason why they had the public inquiry, though, is because the internal processes didn't work. So if that internal process had worked, he would have been out a long time ago.
Lots of you getting in contact. I've got to say, no one seems to be sad. That's not the vibe that I'm getting today, is that you're not sad about Berker basically getting kicked out. Lots of you seem to celebrate it.
I'm not going to go to bat for him, it's fine.
Stephen says it's a day to celebrate that he's been banned from a place that he can't get enough of. Lots of you are saying, well, hang on, he'll just end up in the public gallery or something. Alex says, well, he's bullied MP Brexiteers in debate, so good, ban him. Alex goes a step further and says you should ban him from the UK. Goodness me, Alex. Oof.
That's proper cancel culture, that, isn't
it?
Yeah.
That is. I've got to say,
there ought to be a law. There ought to be a ban.
I don't share your sentiment there, but indeed, all views are welcome. On the NHS, Ron says, with regard to the NHS, today, Michelle, I received my 8th cancellation for an emergency heart and body scan in Lincolnshire NHS. He says it was ordered by my specialist back in August 2021. Let's see what happens next. Ron, I think that's awful. When anyone's got a condition, you gear yourself up, don't you, for the treatment. I'm sorry you've not had it. By the way, it's almost time for me to finish. I didn't get a chance to have a little rant about International Women's Day. I know that I am indeed a woman. Can I even say that these days? Am I even allowed to say that I'm a woman? I've got a cervix anyway.
Yeah, you can.
Anyway, it is International Women's Day. Got to be honest, I think it all goes a little bit far. And if you're a young woman today, you could be forgiven if you've been looking at social media for thinking, well, why would I enter the workplace? I'm going to get bullied. I'm going to get paid less. I'm going to be discriminated against. Come off it, women. You can be and do and have anything that you want. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Anyway, that is all from me. Thank you to my panel. Thank you to you at home. And if indeed you are celebrating International Women's Day, have a good one, and I'll see you tomorrow.